What is up, bros? Me Josh here. In today's video, we are going over the currently work in progress Tier 7 IGN Destroyer, the Yudachi. Now, this has been something that a lot of players have been excited for. Apparently, it is the originator of Poi. I don't really know much about that, but people have been excited for this ship, and it's a real letdown. This ship has 100% a letdown. Not only is it an IGN Torp focused destroyer, which in my opinion is extremely boring, extremely outdated, and has been extremely power crept, which we'll talk about later in the video. But this ship itself does not bring anything to the table. I'm just going to be brutally honest with you guys. This thing was a pain to play. We played them all live on stream. You can always come check us out, twitch.tv/mejash. But really, this thing was a pain and a dread, and boy, was it boring, and I was so happy to finally get a decent game, so I didn't have to play it anymore, because it'll probably get changed a little bit. Again, work in progress, just after subject to change, and boy, does this thing need some love. So first of all, Tier 7, fantastic tier. You have some of the best maps in the game. I think this map is honestly one of my favorite ones. You have a good map rotation, good matchmaking. You tend to be top tiered a lot at Tier 7, as we are right now, so you do have the ability to bully some low tiers, and just overall relatively affordable premiums, and just honestly just really good ships. I think Tier 7 is honestly my favorite tier. I think Tier 10 has some of my favorite ships, but I just don't like to play in the metas and stuff at Tier 10. I think Tier 7 is just honestly some of the most fun. But what does this ship do? It's a Torp focused destroyer, an extremely popular playstyle. Probably one of the most played lines is the IGN Torp destroyers. Personally, though, I don't like it because they tend to be relatively slow and tend to focus too much on the torps to kind of do the heavy lifting. I like the nice balance of lines that have both torps and guns that are pretty effective. This thing, though, as you can see, is kind of focusing on that, but it doesn't really bring much to the table as is. Tier 7 destroyers, there's the Akatsuki in this ship, so you both tech tree ships, and outside of that there is a lot of good premium ships and just a lot of good tech tree ships, especially for destroyers, things like the Haida, the Jervis, the Gajimata. There's a lot of good effective tier 7 destroyers, but it's still an IGN DD. It has 5 shells going out, which we'll go over to the stats in a little bit, and you can still get salvos like that. That is one thing I really do enjoy about the IGN destroyers, is the high alpha damage, but you have, I believe, for a DD, the slowest reload of this tier. Now, it's not like IGN Torp destroyers were going extremely fast on their reload and were machine guns like the IGN gunboats would be, but this one still, and you'll see the majority of my damage this game, besides maybe one Torp salvo, really comes from the guns. I have always enjoyed that, especially since things like the Shima have gotten buffs recently with their guns. They can be extremely deadly, but the standard torps, or the standard guns on this ship, are pretty brutal for how slow they turn. This is an expert marksmanship captain. We'll go over to the captain in a little bit too. But overall, it has some upsides for it. It's Tier 7. I enjoy this a lot, but it's a DD that, in my opinion, is completely outdated. The days are long past for what IGN DDs have kind of like reigned supreme. One of the reasons is being a lot of the nerfs to the torpedoes, and honestly a lot of play for other ships continuing to get good, as we talked about with that power creep. However, though, it is, let's try to keep to the upside. It is a pretty stealthy ship, which is still the niche of the line, but it's tied with the Haida at Tier 7, which will just absolutely obliterate this thing if it actually gets it. But one thing that when I first started playing this ship is I was hoping for a nice spamming. The thing about this is it has a pretty long range on its torpedoes, and an upside about that is it reminded me of kind of old school Fubuki. If you've ever played that ship, it had 20-kilometer torps. And actually what we'll do is we'll bounce over to the port right now, because this is an extremely slow part of this game. It's basically IGN torp play without much to really show for it. So to pass the time of the slow part of this game, we're going to check out the Yudachi stats and then compare them to the other Tier 7s that it will be going against and competing against. So first of all, the Yudachi, and just for a reference, all of the modules are going to be exactly the same for the 3 IGN. If the modules will click over, all the modules will be the same, and the captains will basically be the same, although the one caveat is the Akatsuki, for the example here, will have this basic captain of prior target, last stand, torp reload to get the values down, and then concealment excerpt. Pretty normal, but my captain is a 19 point on the Yudachi, so it will have a couple bonuses, nothing too crazy though. That will really, so radio location will be there, torpedo or acceleration, which we'll talk about, and then expert marksmanship. Other than that, it's basically the same build, so just a reference point right there. So first of all, the Yudachi tier 7 IGN destroyers. Tier 7 IGN destroyers have been severely power crept, especially at tier 7. What does that mean? What is a power creep? Well, other ships are continuing to get stealthier and stealthier, and then the ships that are getting stealthier and stealthier, which tended to be the IGN's thing, have also had better guns. So a great example is ships like the Gajimata, which has been a fantastic ship. Although it's not quite as stealthy, but if you add on radio location, you're going to be able to hunt them down. Not only do you have more life, but you have better guns, better reload. Certain things like the Haida too. The Haida is something that has been extremely strong with a 5.7. So that matches the Yudachi and is actually stealthier than the other two IGN destroyers. Again, much more health and much better guns. So even like stuff like the Z39, you have Hydro to counter it. Obviously, I don't have a captain right there to show it, but the Jervis, there's a bunch of things that have continued to get better and better at this tier, and the IGN DDs have kind of stood still in time. One of the jokes I made is the Yudachi would have been a fantastic premium ship in 2016. This is back when the Fubuki was a tier 8 and had 20-kilometer torps. This would have worked a lot more back then. Nowadays, it's pretty tough to really make an IGN DD that's going to stand out and get anyone really excited outside of people that want to type poi in chat. But anyways, Yudachi, 13,200. Again, that's without survivability expert, but there's a lot of other things I don't think you will take. Again, as we went over the captain build itself, as of right now, you really can't take survivability expert to get that little bit extra life. Comparing that to the two IGN DDs, Akatsuki is a tad on the higher end, just a little bit more than the Akatsuki, and then a little bit more than that on the Shiratsu, so the other tier 7 IGN DDs. Now the guns themselves, you're going to have two sets of two, 2 in the back, another 2 in the back, and then a single right here. Now 5 guns with IGN. Now the alpha is quite high, but the reload is quite long, so 9 seconds on that reload, comparing that to the Akatsuki that has a 7.5 second reload, which has 6 shells going out, so you're going to lose a fight against this ship. And then Shiratsu, again, 2 times 2 at 7.5 second reload, you potentially will lose a fight against even this ship. So although you are at a 5.7 kilometer detection, as you can see down here, you do have that advantage over the 6.4 Akatsuki as well as the 5.8. So you are on the lowest. You're tied with the Haida for the lowest detection at this tier. It does help you up tier a little bit too, but still everything else is pretty dang weak. If you really look at the pros and cons of this ship, honestly, the only pro of this ship is the low detection. Everything else is basically a con. 5 shells going out, but all extremely slow. 9 second reload. You do have a decent little health pool, but it's not really going to help you in the end. One of the biggest what on paper looks nice, but in reality is quite awful. And the things we really want to look at is obviously speed and torp range. It's a base of 57 knots, 15 kilometers. This is pretty nice, but one thing that really stands out is 2 main things. Long reload, 90 seconds, 90.9, 91. That is because we actually had to take torp reloads, so that drops us down. And then 12 kilometers, that gives us the torp acceleration as well. 62 knots, which is decent. But again, one thing we're looking at here is detectability by sea of those torpedoes, 2.5. You see these things coming from miles away, and it is so easy to avoid. It's kind of ridiculous. And just for example, if you have ever played the Akatsuki or the Shiratsu, 2.5 on the Yudachi for detection for the torpedoes. If you go to the Akatsuki or the Shiratsu, 1.6 kilometers. So almost a kilometer more, you get an advantage. And then if you look at the reload for the Akatsuki, 68 seconds on that, and you're setting out 3 sets of 3 every 68 seconds, which are stealthier. Shiratsu has 2 sets of 4 going out, kind of the same thing, same reload, but as we all know, again, 1.6 on there, so they're stealthier. And if you quick look over here, remember the Shiratsu has the pocket, torp consumable of getting another set of torps for each launcher. very quickly 3 times a game. So this is something that is kind of interesting. One thing I also did notice is, I don't know if it was just the torpedoes I was hitting, but it says 17,000. I don't think I really saw a torpedo hit above 12,000. I saw a couple at 8,000, one I think at 9,000. The torps seem to hit for literally nothing compared to this. With an IGN DD, if you've ever played IGN DDs, you feel like they tend to hit extremely hard. This one, I did not see that. So really a lot, again, AA is basically nothing. Maneuverability was all right. But again, the upsides of the ship, low detection, decent health pool. Other than that, you have a slow reload. The turrets need expert marksmanship right now. They are so incredibly slow. So incredibly slow. It was painful. It felt like I was playing a Yamato with the legendary module. And so to even defend yourself, you can't. The turrets turn much slower than the ship does. Torpedoes, although decent on paper, completely avoidable because they're relatively slow and they're spotted from so far away. And on top of that, you're not extremely fast. You really just don't bring anything to the table with this ship other than a low detection. So we are back here. You haven't really missed much, and one of the only things you've missed is me missing a few torp salvos because they're spotted from the moon. Then you'll see right here, still we can beat up on a tier 6 cruiser that doesn't really have his guns on us because our alpha damage is still pretty high. That's one of the things I felt instantly when I was playing this ship, and that's one thing you kind of feel a lot. You kind of just feel that a decent amount when you're playing IGN DDs anyway, is you just feel like you miss torpedoes. With these being spotted from so far away, it's even worse. It was as I say, this ship was painful to play. There was nothing enjoyable about it, and finally I was able to get a decent enough game to just say, okay, this is good enough for the YouTube video. I'm not playing this ship until I change it anymore. But as of right now, we are 7 minutes into this game, haven't had a single torpedo hit because they're just so far, they're spotted from so far away. It was kind of a bummer. I think with the Akatsuki, because they're so much stealthier, or not with the Akatsuki, the tier 7, sorry, I think the Akatsuki, you would have probably got some torpedoes because I would have been able to pump out more faster. With the Shiratsuyu, I probably would have been able to pump out walls of torps with the torpedo. You don't have any of those little tricks or the ability to kind of do that because it's just something that this ship doesn't bring. It brings very basic IGN torp destroyer play that really hasn't been exciting in years. You don't bring like anything. You don't really bring a gimmick, which a lot of ships have started to bring. You just bring a very old school play of IGN torp destroyers. And like I said, it kind of reminds me of an old school Fubuki, which you would run those long torps, but at least then would have 3 sets of 3. This has 2 sets of 4 that are randomly spotted from farther than any other IGN DD torps. And still, there's just not much. This is the play that most of my games would be, because you're just not getting those torp hits. Now with IGN DDs, you're going to miss a lot of torps anyway, but at least you tend to have the volume to pump out a bunch of damage. This one, they're just avoided all the time. There's nothing you can really do. And so you just spend a lot of time firing your guns because your torps aren't hitting anything. And it seems kind of weird to have torps that tend to not hit anything that are long range. It was almost a detriment in certain games too to have those kind of long range torps because you were afraid to launch them, because a lot of people may have been, especially because of the smaller maps, a lot of people would have maybe been in that range and taken a friendly torp. And this is before I switched up to the lower one, which the torp acceleration, because we were at 15 kilometers originally. That's the stock one, that's the standard. So we clicked it down to 12 kilometers with a tad faster, hoping that would help. And we didn't really see much of a difference anyway. Even though it adds 5 knots, still the torps never really hit. So a big downside. There's a lot of things I kind of wish they would do, but I feel like whether anything that I really want, let's just not even talk about what I want. I find a hard time for this ship to really have anything that brings a uniqueness to this ship. Yes, you're stealthy. You're tied for the second stealthiest ship in the game, or at this tier against the Haida. But is it, no matter what they change, are you going to bring anything that will really be unique or fun or have something that really stands out with this style of play? Again, this would have been a perfect ship to have in 2016, 2017, when the game was relatively new. But nowadays, it's just you can play a few tech tree ships and they'll just laugh at this. It's almost going to be completely countered by any hunting destroyer with radio location. So my first view of this ship, my first thoughts of this ship is, man, this is old school. It's like going to your grandma's house and seeing like a dated couch. Like, it was cool back then, but nowadays it's just like, I'm good. I'm gonna pass on that, and that's kind of how this ship is to me. Now I know that Yudachi name itself brings a lot of fans to it, so that is something that I just don't know much about. However, the ship itself is a complete snooze fest. I don't want this to be an entire roast of just this tier 7 premium ship, but I just want to be 100% honest, you guys. I hated playing this ship. There was nothing that got me excited about it. There was nothing that got me interested about it. And there's nothing that made me really go, man, I'm so looking forward to play the next game with this. But I'm also being honest with you, I don't know what they're going to change to make me want to play that. Again, this is not my... And like right there, that New Mexico already sees my torps. He's already seen them to get ready to dodge them. So even a slow New Mexico is just going to matrix his way through the majority of my torps. If those were Shiratsuyu or the Akatsuki, he may have taken 2, if not 3 there, because he just wouldn't have seen him in time. It's kind of a bummer, it really is. But again, back to the point, I don't know what they do to at least make me interested in playing this ship. I don't know what they do to make it better than the Shiratsuyu, which is a tech tree ship. You know, maybe they give this a torp reload booster on top of smoke and all this other stuff. Maybe that would be enough, but to me, the life of IGN torp boats just it's so, I wouldn't say they're kind of obsolete, but in a way they're kind of obsolete. So it's going to be up to somebody that is interested in playing not only the Yudachi name, but also potentially they really enjoy IGN torp boats. On top of that, the current version, I don't even want to really harp on the stats too much because there's no way they keep this as the final version. So we will see some kind of buff version. I guess I can maybe be a little excited about that. Things that they could potentially add, I could see them adding a bit of a buff to the guns. I could see them adding a bit of a buff to the torp reloads, the base torp reload, or maybe a torp reload launcher. And there's a little bit of damage right there. So we end up getting some decent damage on that Nagato, which we were finally close enough to do. But imagine what we could have done this game if we just had the Akatsuki. We could have pumped out more torps. If we would have had more torps faster. The Shiratsuyu would have had a bunch of torp walls we could have sent out. Basically the same thing. Now we're finally getting a little bit of damage in there. But the outcome of this game, when we killed the Pensacola guns, could have done that with anything else. The 3 torp hits we've gotten, which a lot of our damage was on the flooding of that New Mexico because randomly he didn't repair it. But other than that, we could have done so much more with ships that are free. Or ships, we could have done so much more with ships that are, you know, already out, that brings something different. Right now, I'm missing what the uniqueness of this ship is, other than the name, and that's what I feel like it only brings. Is just the name. It brings the name to a very old, very dated playstyle, very dated look, and then really, even back then, it could have been useful, but nowadays, it's honestly, who cares anymore? Who cares? Why would you want a worse IGN destroyer than what the tech trees could have been? So, shout out to these 3 battleships at the end of the game. They ended up making it a little bit easier to pump up some damage for a decent game and a decent video. But in the end, it's just, I don't know. Again, I don't want it to be a total roast of the ship, but I feel like that's all, because there's so little good to talk about this. There's so little upside to this ship that it really is kind of a bummer. And even though I guess you have the low detection, which is fantastic, we got the New Orleans right there. The Baron is going to sail in a straight line and give us a little bit of love. Again, though, he was able to slow down, and instead of taking 2 torps, he was able to take 1. That was a nice 13,000 hit, as we talked about. There was a lot of hits I never saw one near the max roll. 15,000. Never saw one of those. Never saw 17,000. Really, throughout all the games I played in this, we really didn't get too many torpedo hits altogether. It seemed like you were pretty lucky to get one torpedo hit in a torp salvo compared to the other ships themselves. And here, I would love to see like a I don't know, maybe spitting torps out extremely fast. Let the ship be extremely stealthy, but let them be spotted, but just send out a ton of them. Maybe that would be kind of cool. And I know I'm toxic, I'm a dirty. There's our 100K. We'll take the 100K. But overall, zero interest in this ship for me. It was a snooze fest to play, and I'm pretty excited to not have to play it anymore. But overall, just want to be real with you guys. I'm excited to see maybe what the next version is, and I assume it's going to be pretty different than what we see here. So I guess if you are excited about the Yudachi itself, that's something to look forward to, because there's no way that this is anywhere near finalized. Although I think they'll probably add small things, most likely a gun reload, maybe match the tier 7s, most likely a torp buff somewhere, whether that be in detection or in reload, or maybe adding another consumable. But we'll see something. It is going to be an IGN torp focused destroyer, and to me, that doesn't really get me going, but it could get other people going. It's something they are excited for and are interested in. But anyways, guys, this is the work in progress for the Yudachi, the tier 7 IGN premium. Wanted to be 100% real with you guys on my thoughts on this, and hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.